Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. This video I'm calling Writing Practice, and you'll see why in just a minute. Good writing instruction is like good practice in a wrestling room. There's me, Coach Johnson, once upon a time, in a land long ago. Learning to write is very much like learning to speak, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Good writing practice is like wrestling practice. You go to wrestling practice every day. You practice, you get better. Or volleyball practice. There's kind of the old Dr. Johnson when he was Coach Johnson coaching volleyball. Let me do some explaining. But first, speaking practice, writing practice, speaking practice, wrestling practice, volleyball practice. Speaking practice, we do not instruct children in how to speak. We don't go to teaching class. There's not a lot of direct instruction going on. We create the conditions. We help them develop their ability to speak. There's no speaking worksheets that we give out. There's no high, middle, and low ability groups. They are immersed, children are, in the act of speaking, speaking for real purposes, speaking to express their ideas. And with young children, they learn to speak because they're not given corrections. Corrections for grammar and other things are minimal, except instead, they're given responses. Their ideas are responded to versus corrected. With learning to speak, speech is going on all around you. We have models. We have adults who are speaking. And we learn to speak not by mastering a set of little sub-skills. There's no scope and sequence chart for learning to speak. Instead, we are immersed in the whole act of speaking, in an authentic speaking situation, in the whole, and we're given little bits of instruction along the way as we need. In learning to speak, most people speak every day. Speak every day. We don't disrupt speaking because we have to go to something else or a specialist or a field trip. Children speak every day, and children learn to speak because we expect everyone to be able to speak early on, and we recognize those initial attempts at speaking. We do not insist on absolutely correct grammar and pronunciation before we allow children to speak. Well, the same with writing practice, and I like to call it writing practice. There's a little bit of instruction going on, but in a greater sense, we create the conditions. We are condition creators that enable students to develop their ability to write. We create the conditions whereby students are able to develop their full potential as writers. In order for this to happen, of course, students need to write for real purposes, to express their ideas, their thinking, to describe their experiences. And instead of just correcting mistakes, we need to respond to students' ideas. I like that. It made me think of this. Why don't you add that? I like this. That is the response that they need. Children need to be exposed to writing of other children, of teachers. And one of the best things we can do, of course, is to read to children every day so they're exposed to writing. But they should be able to read your writing and the writing of their classmates. And of course, we learn best to write from whole to part. We don't master a series of sub-skills. There's no scope and sequence to master before we're able to write. Instead, starting day one in kindergarten, maybe even preschool, we immerse them in the authentic act of writing, and they learn the skills from whole, being immersed in the whole of writing, to part, learning the little skills. Well, how can they write the first day of kindergarten? Well, they may use more picture clues than letters, but they are creating meaning with print. They are writing. Engage them in the whole. And children, adults, adolescents need to write every day. That's why I call it writing practice. Writing practice. You need to practice your writing every day if you're going to get better at it. And we expect all children, all students, all adults to be able to write and to be able to write well. First day of kindergarten, they should be writing. So, some basics of, some call this writing workshop. I like to call it writing practice because there's so many similarities between practicing writing and practicing wrestling as an old wrestling coach. But we need to spend time, first of all, teaching writers how to practice. Teaching wrestlers how to practice, teaching writers how to practice. In my wrestling room, I keep calling it wrestling class, we had to teach the process of how to drill, how to practice, how to do certain things. In our writing classes, we need to teach children how to draft, how to brainstorm, how to edit, how to revise, how to respond to each other's. Absolutely. And wrestlers, writers need to wrestle and write to get better. Practice. Yes, there's some drill, some little bits of things, but if we spent all wrestling practice just drilling and not actually wrestling, they wouldn't do very well in the match, would they? And that is the whole purpose. Not to do my neat little drill or my worksheet, but it's to actually write or to actually wrestle. The goal is always not to do some cockamamie worksheet, but the goal is always real writing, real wrestling. That's how we should be judged, by our wrestlers' ability to perform in the meet, by our writers' ability to write, to express themselves. And with both wrestling and writing, conversation and feedback are essential. Students talking to each other during wrestling practice, talking to each other during writing instruction is essential in learning how to write and wrestle. So, some basics of writer's workshop, and I call it writing practice. What are some of the basics? Well, at the beginning of the year, it's going to look different than it will later on, but phase one, you want to keep it simple. There'll be quick mini lessons, 5 to 10 minutes, about the writing process, about how the workshop functions or writing practice, pre-writing skills, that sorts of thing. You can't assume students at any level know how to pre-write or draft or revise or edit. You cannot assume that. Many of your first writing activities may be teacher-directed writing prompts where they'll simply pre-write, draft, and share. A pre-writing activity, get your first attempts, sloppy copy, and then share. So these beginning writing sessions, writing practices, may be only 15 to 30 minutes in duration, depending on the age of your students. Writing workshop, writing practice at the beginning of the year will look far different than it looks at the end of the year. And I always recommend teachers, start simple, dream big. Start simple, knowing that you're going to add parts to it as you get more comfortable and as your students get comfortable. Don't expect to have a finished writing workshop first week, first month of the year. So in a sense, your writing workshop, it will be a draft that you keep revising as well. Students, pre-write, draft, share, they will then put their drafts in a portfolio of some sort. And I recommend that a portfolio be kept in a milk carton or box of some sort on the shelf so students don't use their portfolio or their drafts to get lost, or they use the paper for math class or some other things, but keep it on a draft, keep your drafts in a portfolio on a shelf someplace. When it's time for writing, they can go get their portfolios and they can get them out. That also enables you to quickly peruse the portfolios and check your students' progress by looking at the drafts. That is, by the way, authentic and direct assessment. You're looking directly at their authentic writing products to get a sense of where they're coming. And that, by the way, as well, That's how people say, well, Dr. Johnson, what do you teach? Well, look at their writing, see what they need. That is the scope and sequence. Students should then, they have portfolios filled with drafts, so obviously they need to get some drafts so they have some to choose from, but students are able to choose the drafts that they want to take to the revision process. Not all these drafts are hot topics. Donald Graves says only about 1 out of 5 are hot topics. You have a lot of duds that don't go anyplace, but students should be able to choose the drafts, the ones that they want to take to revise and then edit and then put in a show portfolio of some sort. But your writing practice will evolve. You'll need to teach all processes of your writing practice. All processes of writing workshop. You'll need to teach the process, but starts with the basics. In phase 2 of writing practice or writing workshop, you are becoming increasingly prompt-free. Increasingly, you will be able to say, what do you want to write about today? Or what do you think you'll be writing about today? You'll still have a mini lesson, 5 to 10 minutes at most with the whole class. Could be related to a part of the writing process. It could be a skill, a punctuation. This is what a sentence is, but some form of mini lesson. And related to the mini lesson, if you have maybe 3 or 4 students that are struggling with something, you can also have flexible small group mini lessons where you call smaller groups of students up to the table in front to give that short little mini lesson. Status of the class after the mini lesson. Go around the room, 5 minutes at most. Billy, what are you working on today? Title, date, and then some key for what stage they're on. With older students, you could simply have a sign up on a clipboard every day and they write with their name, they write their title, date, and they put the stage on. So you can do it a variety of ways. But again, this is direct assessment. You get a sense of the progress, what they're working on. When it comes time for conferences, you can say, oh, Billy, looks like you've been working on your dog story. Tell us about that. Silent writing, including the teacher then for 5 to 10 minutes, and then a share at the end. This would be phase 2 of the writing process. Phase 3, you'd begin to add writing conferences. Yes, you'd still have the mini lessons, status of the class, silent writing, but you would add conferences. And for 5 to no more than 15 minutes of the day, your writing conferences, students sign up. You can have a conference with usually 2, no more than 3 students a day. And if you have 3 students a day in the course of 2 weeks, you can get through 30 students. That means you can see every student in a very deep and explicit way with their writing. Every 2 weeks, you'll have a conference with a student, a writing conference. And you'll have sharing in small group. You may want to add the author's chair. Here's where 1 or no more than 2 students sign up and they share a piece of writing that they have worked on and taken to the revising and editing stage. They share. And I would say students should sign up for an author's chair maybe once a month or so, make it very special. And students then are able to select pieces from their draft to put it in a show portfolio. And this is a portfolio that the teacher keeps in his or her desk drawer to show students edited writing products. And this is how you should assess writing. Students, by looking at students' finished edited writing products. So phase 3. Phase 4 and beyond, you could add some editing things, a self-editing checklist based on the skills taught. Peer editing, Magic Circle, I've described that other places, but that's a way to get feedback during the revising stage. Some types of publishing, magazine, books, podcasts, others. The teacher drive-by conference is where you're walking around and you simply say, well, tell me about your writing. What are you working on today? It takes anecdotal notes. Or you could organize students so that they can conference with themselves. Once you teach the process, teach students how to respond, You don't have to lead the conference. You can say, okay, boys and girls, for the last 15 minutes of class today, we are going to conference in our small groups. Important ideas. You have writing at all various stages. It doesn't start and stop. So some students are drafting, others revising, editing, publishing. Students get to choose their writing topics, and that also means choice of what they don't want to write about, meaning they have something and it's a stinker and they don't want to take it to the revising stage. They have that choice. Choice is a powerful motivator of anything. You're writing every day. You have a folder for the drafts or sloppy copies. You have another folder that you keep for their finished products, their showpieces, and they get responses versus corrections. There's a place to help students find their errors or mistakes. Checklists are the best way to do that, but you need to respond to ideas. Respond to ideas. Many lessons are short, quickly paced, whole class or small groups. What to teach? Look at your students. See what they need. They are your scope and sequence. The writing conference is a place for the student to talk about their writing. Tell me about your writing, where you're at, where do you think you're going? You are asking questions. It is not an editing session. There are places to do that, but that's not what the conference is about. And you want to keep a schedule so you know which groups are signing up. And I usually have a set rotation where students sign up or confer with me. Boys and girls, these are the students that will be conferencing with me today. I also leave spaces, open spaces, if there's students that need a conference with me, their writing is getting stuck somehow, I do that as well. All right, writing practice, writing workshop, some of the basic elements.